Munkidori is a basic psychic Pokemon with the adrenaline power ability, which allows you to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's awesome, except you can only use that if you have a darkness energy attached to your Munkidori. That's terrible, terrible, terrible.
Munkidori from Twilight Masquerade is possibly the most broken Pokemon card released in the last half decade. At face value with no context or metagame, the card isn't that great, but in the context of the competitive Pokemon TCG, this card becomes maybe the most centralizing and game-changing card we've ever had. And some fatal flaws in the card pool around it were just more fuel for the fire. So today I'm here to break down the entire history of Munkidori, explain why it's so uniquely strong, why it wasn't too broken upon release, and the ridiculous circumstances that led to it completely taking over the Pokemon trading card game. Like and hype the video if you enjoy, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get started. Munkidori was released in the Scarlet and Violet Twilight Masquerade expansion in May 2024, just in time to be legal at the 2024 North America International Championships, which was also the largest tournament of the entire season. Munkidori is a 110 hit point basic psychic Pokemon with the Adrenabrain ability. Once during your turn, if Munkidori has a darkness energy attached to it, you may move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Keep in mind that moving damage from one of your Pokemon to another of your own Pokemon is already really good, but cards that move damage from or among your opponent's Pokemon are often insanely strong as well. Cards like Dusknoir from Boundaries Crossed and Jinx from Unified Minds proved how strong this was by each becoming metagame staples at their peak, but Munkidori is truly one of a kind in that it has an ability that can move damage from your board to your opponent's. Normally this effect requires some sort of attack or supporter card, but Munkidori just needed you to commit your valuable energy attachment for the turn to it. This might seem bad at first, but think about it. Why would this requirement matter if you have other ways to cheat the energy attachment system? What if your entire deck was built around single energy attackers? Or what if your whole deck was built around Munkidori itself? Well, then it wouldn't be that big of a drawback to just attach to Munkidori every turn, as it wouldn't harm your strategy in the slightest. In fact, attaching to Munkidori would only provide benefits. Its attack Mind Bend seems weak at first glance, just doing 60 damage and confusing the opponent's active Pokemon. But I think it's best to talk about Mind Bend later, as that's where it becomes more relevant to our story. Anyways, Munkidori already had a clear home upon release. A home which everyone loves, wink wink, and a home where it would stay for the next 2 years. Gardevoir. Gardevoir EX from Scarlet and Violet base set needs no introduction, but in case you need one, I have a full breakdown on this channel you can watch after this one. Basically, Gardevoir's ability, Psychic Embrace, accelerates psychic energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon, and it damages them while doing so. With infinite energy acceleration and free damage being built up on your board, Munkidori could sit on your bench, take an attachment for turn with a dark energy, and move that damage to the opponent. While sitting on your bench, Munkidori could amplify your damage, heal key Pokemon like Gardevoir, and also be used to take multi-prize turns by using Adrenabrain to take one knockout and using another attacker to take the next. A common interaction that is now fundamental to the Gardevoir deck is to promote Gardevoir once the opponent knocks out your active Pokemon, attach 2 Psychics with Gardevoir's ability to retreat, and then move 30 to 40 of that damage to the opponent with Munkidori, all the while pivoting into your attacker. With 2 Munkidori established, Gardevoir can now power up itself with 3 energy, heal all 60 damage and move it to the opponent's board, either to the active or to the bench, and then use Miracle Force to do 190 to the active. It was truly a perfect fit. One so perfect that Gardevoir quickly took over the format's sole major event, NAIC 2024. With 6 Gardevoir in top 8, 3 in top 4, and 1 in the finals, it was clear that Munkidori had just become a permanent 1 or 2F staple and one of the best decks in the game. After a great showing at NAIC, people predicted Gardevoir and Munkidori would perform very well at the next major tournament, the World Championships in 2024. However, prior to Worlds and after NAIC, Shrouded Fable released, and as I covered in my Gardevoir video, this game-changing expansion brought with it too many obstacles for Gardevoir to overcome. Regidrago V-Star from Silver Tempest with the newly released Kyurem from Shrouded Fable was arguably the best deck in the game, and it just so happened to have a very favored matchup into Gardevoir. Dusknoir slotted into existing Charizard EX and Dragapult EX decks, and it was a pain for Gardevoir to deal with since it could be used to take multi-prize turns without attacking multiple times. Despite Dragapult going MIA for this tournament, Charizard had a very solid run, and in the top 4 decks specifically, all of Iron Thorns EX, Roaring Moon EX, Miraidon EX, and Regidrago V-Star had either decent or nearly unlosable matchups into Gardevoir. To put it simply, Gardevoir, the only Munkidori deck, couldn't overcome newer cards and ended up with one top 16 appearance and a mediocre performance past that. With the 2024 season done, we were on to 2025 with the Baltimore Regional Championships, which is in the same format as Worlds. However, to everyone's surprise, Gardevoir came out on top. Henry Chow, the undisputed greatest Gardevoir player of all time, won his first regional championships with a turbo-style Guardy list featuring one Munkidori. Gardevoir was still a solid meta deck for the rest of the 2024 calendar year, but Munkidori was occasionally called into question. Was it actually that good of a card, or is it just being carried by Gardevoir, a deck that was great even without it? I mean, cards that are only used in one archetype like Munkidori are usually mediocre cards on their own, like Kyurem in Regidrago, Wordier V and Chinchino in Lugia, etc, etc. So Munkidori being used in just one archetype to a high level of success wasn't a great indicator of overall greatness. However, Munkidori would find a larger role in the metagame at the start of the 2025 calendar year. Goldengo EX is not one of the decks you'd really expect a Munkidori in, but it actually made perfect sense for the 2025 EUIC metagame. Goldengo attacks for just one energy, meaning once you've attacked with Goldengo once against slower decks like Dragapult and Gardevoir who aren't taking one-hit knockouts, Munkidori was pretty easy to commit an attachment to. Also, the Energy Search Pro A spec from Searching Sparks was the focal point of the deck, which searched your deck for one energy of every type and added them to your hand. Since Goldengo would discard these energies to attack, and you were forced to search out a dark energy anyways, Munkidori was even easier to access. Lastly, the Goldengo archetype likes to play around 11 to 12 energy cards to ensure it can consistently chain attacks. This also increased the odds of pulling off a turn 1 Technical Machine evolution play, and it reduced prize card variance. This meant that with 3 metal energy and 1 of every type, you were at just 10 energy, so why not add a second dark energy to better utilize Munkidori and get up to 11? Top American players at EUIC believed in the strategy and decided Munkidori was well worth the inclusion, largely due to his positive impact versus Dragapult, Gardevoir, and Regidrago, all meta decks. The healing and damage amplification came in pretty handy when trying to secure wins, and Goldengo would place 3rd at the hands of Xander Perot, but Munkidori would go even further. Ryuki Okada would win the whole event with 1 Munkidori and 1 Dark Energy in his Cloth Terapagos deck. This deck only used double turbo energy to attack and power up 1 energy attackers like Cloth, Terapagos EX, and Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, all of which benefited from Brute Bonnet's Poison and the Binding Mochi tool card, which increased the damage of poisoned Pokemon by 40. However, Munkidori was really played because of its synergy with Budew in this deck. Budew is one of the most infamous cards ever, having 30 HP, doing 10 damage and item locking the opponent. However, with a Binding Mochi and a Poison, Budew could do a devastating 50 damage on its own with an item lock attack, which would actually put lots of pressure on Pokemon since Brute Bonnet also poisoned the opponent. With Radiant Hisuian Sneasler in play, Budew with a Binding Mochi dealt a total of 80 damage for 0 energy while item locking the opponent. However, there was one massive problem with this strategy, being that Budew has only 30 HP, meaning it would die to the poison chip right after its second attack. But this is where Munkidori and 1 Darkness energy came in. With Area 0 Underdepths expanding bench size to 8, bench space wasn't an issue, and Budew attacked for free, so attaching the energy was pretty easy as well. Or Steel Stone could be used to search out the dark energy no problem, and Munkidori could prevent Budew from dying to poison while adding even more damage to the opponent. It also synergized with the big attackers of the deck, who all had predictable and low damage output, meaning Munkidori could add some of that extra poison damage to get over the hump on some knockouts. So despite 0 Gardevoir in top 8 of this event, Munkidori played a key role in 3 top 8 decks. Wait, 3? Didn't I just say that Munkidori was using Goldengo and Cloth? Both of which only had 1 appearance in the top 8. Well, we're gonna get back to the most stupid reason Munkidori was used in a bit. For now, Munkidori had proved that it was more than just a Gardevoir card. Yeah, it was still winning regionals in Gardevoir like in San Antonio, but it had evolved past that to where multiple tier 1 and tier 2 decks could utilize it to great results. However, rotation was just around the corner, and with Gardevoir looking dead in the water, losing Refinement Kirlia, it was unclear what the future held for Munkidori. Initially after rotation, Munkidori found a home in wall decks. These are matchup fishing decks, meaning that they prey on weaknesses of the metagame and hope to hit good matchups consecutively to perform. Farigiraf EX has an ability making it immune to all damage from basic EX Pokemon. Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX is immune to all damage from any Pokemon that has an ability, and Milotic EX is immune to all damage and effects of attacks from Terra Pokemon like Dragapult, Terapagos, and Charizard. Munkidori was used because of its healing and damage scaling capabilities, which amplified the annoyingness of breaking the walls in this archetype. Going into Atlanta Regionals 2025, people thought walls were going to have a pretty big performance. This was largely because a major obstacle for walls was Gardevoir, and Gardevoir just lost its broken draw engine, making it terrible. Right? Wrong. Turns out the archetype here to stop the new Munkidori archetype was the one it first called home. When the dust had settled at Atlanta Regionals, Henry Chow had done it again. Now a 3-time regional champion, all with Gardevoir and Munkidori. Thanks to the newly released Lili's Clefairy EX from Journey Together, Gardevoir served as not only a perfect wall breaker with Screamtail and Drifloon, but also a check to Dragapult, by far the most popular deck in the format. Despite losing Kirlia, players made it work with Fezandipiti EX's Flip the Script ability as draw power, and Henry even played a 1-2 ends Zoroark EX line as extra draw support. This was the turning point of the format, the moment that walls went from good to unplayable, and Gardevoir went from unplayable to broken. Over the next few months, Gardevoir went on a rampage, now playing at the minimum 3 Munkidori. This was because the bench space required for more than one Munkidori in Gardevoir was much easier to justify now that bench space wasn't being allocated to a flock of Kirlia. Munkidori would win almost every single Western event in a row until Milwaukee Regionals, where it placed second in a Dragapult EX deck. But what's interesting about this is that Dragapult wasn't very synergistic with Munkidori. Despite both cards thriving on spread damage, Dragapult had an awkward energy cost and valued every manual attachment it could get, meaning Munkidori could go games upon games without even having a chance to be powered up, because doing so would make attacking with Dragapult impossible that turn. However, Munkidori wasn't played in Dragapult because it was necessarily good in Dragapult, but because it was the best counter to the most unstoppable card in the game, Munkidori. Yeah, with Gardevoir playing around 3 to 4 Munkidori, decks needed a way to answer it, because it was so powerful. But not every deck, especially Dragapult, could play the obvious counter card in Picnic Basket. Picnic Basket heals 30 damage from all Pokemon in play, yours and your opponent's, meaning you could heal damage that was being spread by Munkidori on your board, and heal the damage your opponent was trying to move to your board with Picnic Basket's secondary effect. So people soon realized the only way to defend against a horde of Munkidoris was to invest in your own. The metagame shifted from Dragapult-centric to Munkidori-centric. If you had zero answer to Adrenabrain in your deck, you were going to lose. But that meant playing your own Munkidori in most decks, which somehow skyrocketed its usage even higher. We haven't really had a situation like this since 2012 with Mewtwo EX and its X-Ball attack. In that instance, Mewtwo was the best counter to another Mewtwo because they were both weak to each other's 1 energy attack, but here it was because the best way to counter damage being moved from the opponent to you was actually just to move it right back to the opponent where it belonged. Munkidori had officially taken over the Pokemon TCG, and right when we needed it most, Destined Rivals was here to save the day by printing another broken Munkidori deck in Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX. And it also required at least 3 Munkidori to be viable and 4 to be played optimally. Yay! Yeah, as it turns out, Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX synergized extremely well with Munkidori, as well as another Munkidori partner, this time from the exact same set, Twilight Masquerade, Frostlass. Frostlass's Freezing Shroud ability places 1 damage counter on every Pokemon in between turns that has an ability, except for any Frostlass. Munkidori obviously has an ability, and likes to have damage to move with its ability onto the opponent, and likes to use this ability every turn. Frostlass was an obvious combo with Munkidori, but it was really Grimmsnarl that took it over the top. Grimm is one of the most efficient attackers you can ask for, powering itself up with this ability and doing 180 to the active and 30 to the bench for just 2 Dark Energy. Since you already played Dark Energy for Munkidori, Grimmsnarl wasn't that hard to fit, and this combo saved deck space by not needing to play different energy types like Gardevoir did. Also, since Grimmsnarl powers itself up, you can use your manual attachments on Munkidori, meaning you could get even more Munkidoris powered up than most decks. So with just 1 set release, the meta completely shifted. Grimmsnarl was the new kid on the block with a solid Gardevoir matchup and the abusive Munkidori under his belt. As such, Raging Bolt and Joltik Box came up as decks with positive Grimm matchups, but both of those lost to Gardevoir. Dragapult was still playable into all of these decks and saw heavy usage with either 1 or 2 Munkidori in it as a check to other monkeys. With Grimm, Polt, and Guardy being so good, Goldango was still a solid play and required a Munkidori to be played optimally. And Zoroark EX also didn't struggle in this meta with either 1 or 2 Munkidori at the minimum. What we ended ended up with was just one non-Munkidori deck in top 8 being a rogue Toedscruel deck. Munkidori was now clearly the most centralizing card in the Pokemon TCG, dominating and winning NAIC 2025. You either abused Munkidori or played Munkidori to counter other Munkidori decks with practically no in-between. The famous Monkey Wars decided the outcome of almost every game. As made evident by gameplay, whoever won the Monkey War would win the game. People were begging for something to be done, either a ban or a hard counter to Munkidori. People weren't really as upset with Gardevoir itself or even Grimmsnarl, but they were upset with how Munkidori was enabling them to ridiculous success. For the 2025 World Championships, if you predicted Munkidori would win the event, it would be like saying the top 8 of Worlds would include one Fezandipiti EX. It was basically guaranteed. Munkidori placed 1st, 2nd, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. With his first win at Worlds, Munkidori has now cemented itself in TCG history as one of the best Pokemon to ever do it. But it was far from done there. Post-Worlds 2025 was also dominated by, you guessed it, Munkidori, but more so in Gardevoir this time. Gardevoir had obviously won Worlds, but what was more interesting about Gardevoir in this format and even the NAIC format was that it abused Munkidori more than any other deck, because it took advantage of the quote-unquote terrible attack Mind Bend as part of major matchup strategies. Mind Bend confuses the opponent's active Pokemon while doing 60 damage, meaning that if they don't switch out, they have to flip a coin to attack. If they flip heads, they deal the attack no problem, but if they flip tails, the attack fails and they do 30 damage to themselves instead. Versus dark decks like Grimmsnarl and Charizard, who played low mobility counts and could one-shot their entire board, Mind Bend became a win condition to push through what would be bad matchups and scam wins like only Gardevoir could. At first in the post-Worlds format, it was classic Gardevoir that was dominating with Screamtail and some Bravery Charms. But then meta shifts led to Gardevoir EX with Jellicent EX and Frillish becoming the superior play. Despite needing even more deck space for the fishes, no sane player dared to go below 3 Munkidori, as that would be essentially throwing. However, once Mega Evolution released, the Milwaukee Regional Championships would be dominated by a brand new archetype of Mega Pokemon, and the biggest enabler of core strategies in it was none other than Mega Kangaskhan EX. Just kidding, it's Munkidori again. Mega Absol is another dark-type attacker who synergizes very well with Munkidori. Terminal Period costs 2 energy and instantly knocks out the opponent's active Pokemon if it has exactly 6 damage counters on it. So if you had 60 or more damage on one of your Pokemon, 2 uses of Adrenabrain would turn into a delete button with Absol. It also functioned as a wall enabler, healing the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX in this deck, which helped it muscle through decks like Zoroark EX and Goldengo EX. The least amount of Munkidori you could play in this deck was 2, but many successful lists went up to 3 because prizing one of your 2 Munkidoris could mean losing the Monkey War in common matchups. In this brand new format, Munkidori was once again the king. It won event after event, but once Goldengo combined with Solrock and Lunatone emerged as a tier 1 archetype, the Munkidori decks adapted, and Munkidori once again kept its chokehold on the metagame. Even Goldengo Rocks, a deck with zero sane reason to play Darkness Energy, found tons of success with 1 Munkidori and 1 Dark Energy because it was just that good versus every Munkidori deck, which it turned out was basically every deck in the game. After the release of Phantasmal Flames, the metagame was centralized around 4 top dogs, being Dragapult, Goldengo, Gardevoir, and Charizard, all of which regularly played Munkidori. The clear numbers 5, 6, and 7, haha funny, after them were Grimmsnarl, Mega Absol, and Zoroark, all of which couldn't play optimally without Munkidori. At EUIC 2026, the crowning event of this format, Mega Absol came out on top with Munkidori once again dominating the standings and adding to one of the most impressive Limitless pages of all time. With Ascended Heroes releasing, that format is similar to the last, except with Zoroark, Grimmsnarl, and Dragapult being much better, all of which can't sleeve up without the monkey in the 60. Munkidori right now, in the post-rotation perfect order format, is still really good. It's seeing heavy usage in Dragapult and is used in Zoroark as well as other decks. However, unlike the past, there is actually hope for the future now. With Chaos Rising releasing, Patrat will release with an ability that prevents both players from using Adrenabrain as long as it's on the field. Despite being weak to Team Rocket's Watchtower, which is a decent stadium option in the post-rotation card pool, it's difficult to say whether or not Patrat is the solution we need. However, it is at the absolute least a step in the right direction. In summary, Munkidori isn't the most broken card in the game at face value, but in combination with other strong cards, it becomes the most centralizing force in the game. But one of the main problems wasn't even the lack of counterplay, but rather the fact that the counterplay and the offender were one and the same. The card that made damaging your own Pokemon vital to winning. The same card that turned literally every top deck into either a spread deck or an OHKO deck. And the same card that has undoubtedly changed the Pokemon TCG forever.